So welcome guys. Today we're going to talk about product KPIs. I think this is one of those skills that every product manager must master. I promise you that we're going to up-level your product management skills. I've broken down our talk into 4 different sections, and we're going to talk about 5 odd KPIs within each section. And very first section is the business KPIs. Let me be very, very blunt here. Product managers are not engineering managers. They're not delivery leads. Their only goal is to maximize the ROI of their product. Every bit of time spent by the teams that are employed on the product, that is the responsibility of a product manager. So you can't really skim on the fact that you're not building for revenue. You are 100% building for financial metrics. And this is where we're going to start talking about some of the top metrics. Revenue is pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any confusion with revenue. Please feel free to write in the comments if you don't understand what revenue is. But I do want to talk about 2 other things which you should start looking at. First is the cost of the goods sold, or in our paradigm or in the technical world, you can say the cost of the services or the cost of the product that you're developing. This will have some bits of variable cost as well as operational costs. So you should be able to identify and if not track regularly, but have an eye on these matrices. Your infra cost, your tooling cost, etc., etc. Finally, the margins. A great product manager is a one who will have their eye set on profitability. So you can't just really be saying, hey, I'm building a product, I don't know about profitability. You might not hit profitability in year 1, year 2, year 3, but you should have your vision set that, and not just a vision set. You should have a clear path or roadmap to getting to profitability, which might mean required cuts in technology, in spending, or could mean that you will have to scale to a certain point, which also becomes a great way for you to trace back and say, hey, for profitability, I need to meet a certain number of users or certain number of downloads or certain number of ticket size for that matter. So this is very, very critical for you. Next, ARR and NRR. So ARR stands for your annual recurring revenue, which is mostly in the cases of subscription or SaaS businesses that you have recurring revenues every year, or in some cases monthly, MRR for that matter. NRR, on the other hand, is a net recurring revenue. It is basically measured that, for example, this year you have 100 users each paying you ₹1. So you have got your annual recurring revenue of 100 rupees. The next year, if you retain those 100 users, your NRR would be 100. But if you retain 90 users, your NRR would be 90. So it is how much of your ARR are you able to bring to the next year. Now, if you sell more, your NRR will be higher. So for example, last year your ARR was 100. This year, your NRR is 125. It means that from the same set of users last year, 100, you're now able to generate 125 worth of revenue. Customer acquisition cost. Customer acquisition cost is pretty straightforward, and it's very, very important for you to understand, because this includes all of the fancy stuff that we hear about discounting. We'll give them this freebie, we'll give them this freebie. Nothing is free. So if you're giving something free to your user, you should have an action plan in mind that this is the cost of acquiring that user. And we'll come to what is the other key metric that you need to track to balance out the CAC. And this is the customer lifetime value, sometimes also called as lifetime value of a user. My favorite example of explaining the lifetime value is through games. So let's look at maybe any of your favorite mobile game, for example. So let's take the most famous PUBG, BGMI, whatever you want to call that. So let's say a user plays that game for 6 months. And within that 6 months or 180 days, they spend, let's say, $500 on that particular game. We know the average length of a user playing that game is 3 years, for example. In every 6 months, they're going to spend $500. So every year they're going to spend $1,000. In 3 years, they're going to spend $3,000. So the lifetime value that I will get from one particular user, it's around $3,000. So I need to ensure that the cost of acquiring one user cannot be more than $3,000. And then I have to do all of the math around my profitability, etc., etc. Cool. So just a recap around financial metrics. We talked about revenue, COGS, margins. We talked about ARR, MRR, NRR. We talked about acquisition, and we also talked about lifetime values. Awesome. Now, this is my favorite section because I am all about users. I'm all about making the life of our users better. So this is where we need to really go deeper into understanding if our users are really liking our app, and how are they using our app, and what should we do to improve our app. Let's look at active users. So active users, there are different terms. They are called daily active users, weekly active users, monthly active users. Then again, there are different ways of looking at an active user. There are rolling retention rates, there are end day retention rates, and all different apps, different products will choose to look at active user slightly differently. But to keep it very simple, we'll say a daily active user is a user which logs on to your app or uses your app daily. A monthly active user is a user that logs on to your app or uses your app once in a month at least. More than that, they're still an MAU. Lesser than that, they're not an MAU. Awesome. The next is activation rate. Now, this is a very deep topic in itself, but just to oversimplify this for you, I'd say the number of users that have taken certain number of steps within your application or in your product so that now they are activated. Now, let me give you an example of what that means. So Facebook used to define activated users as users who have made 7 friends. Uber would define activated users as users who have booked at least 3 cabs in a week. All right. Let's take another example. Let's take another gaming example. So an activated user on a PUBG game would be a user who have played at least n number of games. So this is the number of users that have not just logged on to your application, but they have taken some action on the application and now part of your loop or part of that core loop of your application. Cool. Next is retention rate. Now, like I told you, DAUs, MAUs, or your active users, that's all part of retention. And there are different ways to look at retention. Overall, it could be the number of users that are coming back to your app. That's the simplest way to look at it. However, you can go very deep into retention and just look at DAUs, weekly active users, monthly active users. You can even break it down further and look at retention from a frequent versus infrequent versus occasional users. All really depends on the kind of product that you're running. So from a B2B enterprise product perspective, retention is not as big of a metric because people have already paid for that tool. Enterprise have already bought that tool. So their users are kind of using that without any other way. Whereas for a B2C app, this becomes one of the biggest metric to drive. Because if you remember our B2C funnel, it is usually AARRR, which is acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. So retention is the key component of moving your people forward to revenue. And let me tell you guys, one retained user is actually much better than 30 or 40 new users. And we'll talk about it in some other video, but yeah. All right. Finally, churn rate. Now, this is 1 minus retention rate. It is the total number of users that are dropping from your application or your product. Now, this could be measured, like I said, daily, weekly, monthly, up to you. But you need to have a real sense around what the churn rate of your users are. Within the user section, I did mention that how your users are using your application, but do you have a track of how are they feeling about your application? This is that one single line question that you can ask your users, which will give you a great sense of how they're feeling about your app. And usually this question goes like, would you recommend our app to your friends, family, and colleagues? So see what we are trying to do here. We are putting the user in a place that they are going to take their own recommendation and go to their friends, which means they are risking their own credibility. For that, they have to really, really like a product and not just like a product, love it so much that they are ready to risk it. And we measure it on a scale of 10. So if somebody, let's say, gives me 10, what it is telling me that they are super fond of my product. They're ready to risk their neck for my product. Somebody giving me a 6 or 7 means they like my product, but not enough for them to recommend that product. Somebody giving me a 1 is like, not forget recommending. They will tell others that never use this app. So they are basically deterrent. They are people who are not going to promote my app. They're not even neutral about it. They're going to tell people never use this app. So this is a single line blanket for you to measure how fond your users are for your app. The proxy for B2C would come from your app store feedbacks, would come from your in-app feedbacks. But NPS really gives you that picture of, is the user really going to talk about your app and promote it like it's their own app? All right, just to recap, within the user KPIs, we looked at DAU, MAUs, we looked at activation rate, we looked at retention rate, churn rate, and we also looked at NPS. Awesome. Not everything can be measured just by talking to the customers, and not every product can be built by just following functional requirements. Let me ask you, would you rather use an app which is fluid, smooth, faster to load than an app which is slow, sluggish, written with ads, etc., but gives you 5 rupee discount? You would rather use an app which is free from ads and smooth and quickly loads and takes you to what you want to do rather than save 5 rupees. Of course, there would be users of that 5 rupee discount, but there also be users who say, I'll skim on that 5 rupee because I want that better experience. This is where And this collectively, what I talked about are the non-functional requirements of our app. I've broken this whole section starting from more B2B KPIs in the front and then loading the B2C KPIs near the end. So let's just quickly walk through them. Feature adoption rate. In a product org or a product team, how it's usually structured is that there is some lead product manager or a principal product manager who is looking at a couple of different products within that kitty. Within each, there'll be for each product, there'll be a lead product manager, and within each product, there'll be PMs and SPMs who are looking at different features. So now let's take an example of a feature. Let's say we are building a CRM application, customer relationship management application, which is all about tracking leads, new users, etc. And just generating more revenue. For that particular CRM, let's say a product manager is tasked to build a communication platform or a task, and their goal is to build a one-stop shop where people can come in and send WhatsApp messages to all of their leads. This is just one feature. Similarly, there are 5 different PMs owning 5 different features. How do you really track if the feature that they are building is being used or not? That is your feature adoption rate. It is as critical as saying what is the number of downloads of my app. And when you look at larger products, when you look at B2B products where they could have up to thousands of different features, tracking the feature adoption rate of each new feature is absolutely critical. Because it is not just about keep on adding more features. Because if you keep adding more features, what you're doing is you're making life of your user miserable. The goal is not to overload our users with features. The goal is to help our users solve problems. Task success rate. We're building a feature. Why are we building a feature? Because we want to solve a problem. Is my feature solving that problem? Is my user able to solve their problem by using my feature? That is the task success rate. For example, like I said, we were building a CRM. We are building WhatsApp integration within CRM. Are my users able to send WhatsApp messages using my feature? That's just as simple as that is your task success rate. Time to value. This is one of the more underrated matrices, and I know very few PMs that track it. However, as soon as you move up in your career, this is the term that you're going to hear from top leadership, from stakeholders, from business partners, everybody. It is nothing but time to value. It is how quickly are you able to solve the problem for your customers. From the time that your user has opened your CRM to the time that they were able to reach out to their user. How quickly were they able to solve that whole thing? This is the time to value. And if I'm just extrapolating this, I can put this into a frame of saying, I know that my users are facing a problem. How quickly can I do everything, including research, building a feature, deploying it to production, testing for bugs, reiterating, eventually end up solving problem for them. That is the time to value for that problem. So again, very critical. It measures the complete end-to-end time from the user logging onto your product or starting to use your product to the time that their problem is actually solved. All right. Error rate. This is 1 minus task success rate, to be honest, but this could also include other errors that your application or product is now throwing up. Again, more B2B relevant than B2C. B2C, we simply call them bugs, and they in B2C, there is no second chances because people will drop off and they'll go to different apps. In enterprises, error rates can be tracked easier. Error rates can be iterated on easier. However, having said that, they're also much more punishing because the contract size is much higher. So error rate becomes a much more important factor if you're tracking in the B2B space. Page load time, performance. One of the basics of building an application is to keep it crisp, keep it fast, keep it super smooth for your user. There is no two-way about it. You have to do it. You will do it. You will have to make the most smooth, the most user-friendly, the fastest working application in the market. This is a different race altogether. Your engineers cannot skim on that. You as a product manager cannot skim on that. Awesome. So just to reiterate, from a product performance standpoint, we talked about feature adoption rate, we talked about task success rate, time to value, error rate, and page load performance. Finally, team. It's all about team, guys. And one of my favorite sayings is, and you can see it on the screen, is that if you catch lightning in a bottle, you will need a team to hold on to it. We'll put some KPIs to measure the performance because day to day, we are all very busy. All of us are just working towards goals, towards our KRAs, KPIs, etc. So we also need to take a step back and retrospectively look, are we on the right path or not? So these next 5 KPIs will make you an expert in not just managing your team, but also measuring if you guys are moving in the right direction. Awesome. So the very first thing is velocity. Don't confuse this with speed or agility. Velocity is, and it's a term which we mostly use in sprint based developments or agile development. It is basically the number of story points that you're able to do in a sprint. Now there are a couple of things that I say there, and would have to go deeper into all of them eventually. But story points are a pseudo or a proxy to tell how difficult a task is, or how much effort would it require to do a task. If I were to oversimplify velocity, is how many tasks are you able to do in a sprint, or how many tasks each of your developer is able to do in a sprint. And then you add all of them and you have, let's say, a number. You did 40 story points worth of task in 1 week, one sprint. In the next sprint, are you doing 42? Are you doing 38? That's how you measure a velocity. Ideally, in a very ideal scenario, you should never be going down, or you should be within error rates, or plus minus 5% of your velocity. Sprint burn down. So this is actually related to the planning estimation of your team. You decide to build a feature, you wrote a beautiful PRD around that feature, you went to your team and you guys discussed, okay, yeah, this is what we want to build. The team planned that they will do it in 1 sprint worth of task, but near the end of the sprint, it turns out that you guys did not look at all of the edge cases, and now it needs 2 sprints. So what you did is you were not able to completely estimate the time that it would require. What it really boils down to, were you able to accurately estimate the effort required to do that task? And that is the sprint burn down. So you estimated, let's say, we will build this 4 tasks this week, but you actually ended up just building 3 tasks or doing 3 tasks. So you were actually at a 75% of what you planned to do. Overall, this helps you maintain better estimation going ahead. Bug count. No product is built perfect. No product is built without bugs. No product is built without issues. So don't worry if you're facing bugs or your team's facing bugs. Of course, it's best practices that we reduce the number of bugs that we encounter every time that we are building stuff. And this is where a metric like this really helps. This is an ongoing way for you to keep tracking if my bug rate going down. So every sprint, let's say after every sprint, your team is testing and they're finding, okay, 10 bugs, 15 bugs. And your goal is to go ahead and keep on reducing that bug count every sprint. It's not about, I'm not talking about the total bug count. Your goal is to anyway reduce your total bug count to 0, but an ongoing sprint activity, your bug rate should be going down. Lead time. Now, the next 2 are my most favorite KPIs from a team perspective. We talk about velocity, we talk about agility. All of us want to be part of product teams that ship daily. And this is where these 2 metrics really start playing a factor. First is lead time. What does lead time mean? Lead time means from idea to release. You talk to your customer, you got your feedback. How much time will it take for you to have it in general availability or in the production environment? That's your lead time. Very few people measure that, and it's painful to sometimes look at what you think your lead time would be and what you actually ended up with. Customer feedback loop time. Very similar to lead time, but it just actually measures the time post your first release. So you have made a product, you have released it into the production environment or general availability. Now you talk to your customers, they give you a feedback, you circle back and get to a new version. How much time do you take that? So that's the customer feedback loop time. And this is where, just summarizing all of the team and execution KPIs that we talked about: velocity, sprint burn down time, bug rate, lead time, customer feedback loop time. So very quick, 4 sections, 5 KPIs each, 20 metrics, helps you elevate being a product manager.